It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, your knowledge-based property podcast, and we're doing it 7 days a week from all corners of the Australian housing market. And of course, you can hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon. Well, we're up to November the 28th. It is a Thursday morning. Australia's annual inflation rate held pretty steady at 2.1% for October, matching September's figure and marking the lowest level since July of 2021. Significant price increases were seen in food and also non-alcoholic beverages and recreation. However, electricity prices saw a record annual drop of 35.6%, contributing to the stability. Are you feeling that with your electricity bill? Might be one thing to drop, but whether or not you're feeling it in the hip pocket might be an entirely different thing. The ABS, now they noted that declines in electricity and fuel prices played a significant role in shaping the CPI numbers, and so now all focus is on December with that Christmas spend. Right now, though, this morning we're going to take you off to the US and catch up with a property investor there. One of the big problems right now in the US are squatters. And it's not the type of squatters where they move in for a night or two and then get their marching orders. No. They are moving in for good. So let's catch up with George McCleary, and he is based in Portland in Oregon in the US. And good morning to you, George. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast.
What's up, Craig? So happy to be here.
Have you been to Australia by any chance?
I actually have, yeah. After I graduated college, I moved there for 6 months with no real plan other than to just travel around and have the time of my life. And I'm happy to announce that I accomplished that goal in Australia. I love it there.
Good stuff. And I think a few more Americans are planning on moving to Australia permanently since the US election results. But we do want to talk this morning about these wretched squatters moving into your property. In fact, you've got some direct experience about this.
Yes, sir. So what happened to me is I made a video earlier this year that went super viral, like tens of millions of views, about where I pretended to be a squatter. And it was real tongue in cheek, but a lot of people took it seriously. And it landed me like on the news, on talk shows, on News Nation. I went on the Dr. Phil show. What it really kind of showed me is that this is a much bigger deal and a much more underserved market than I'd first realized, because I've never had like a real bad squatter situation before, but a few of my friends have, and it's lax laws, it's loopholes that squatters are taking advantage of. And then in the process, I learned about something called deed fraud, which is a very insidious crime that's growing in popularity and robbing homeowners of all their equity. So I started Squatter Defender and Title Fraud Defender to help defend property owners against those. And that's been my little 2025 side quest.
So tell us a little bit more about that deed fraud that you're talking about.
Yeah, so a deed, at least here in America, and I think it's like this other places too, it's just a piece of paper with a notary stamp on it, and you can file it with the county clerk, and just like that, you can change the title to a property. And if you go through a series of steps, you steal an identity and you put it in that identity, you can actually steal the title to somebody's house and then resell it and then pocket all of that equity into your ill-begotten bank account. It was one of those things where I found out about it. It wasn't that common, but it's like doubling every year, that sort of thing. And there's not a lot that's being done about it. So when I started Title Fraud Defender, it was really in an effort to help protect my fellow investors from it. But actually, most of the people that are signing up on our website to protect their titles, not all of them are investors. They're just concerned homeowners about this growing crime.
So not everybody has seen the video that you're talking about. When you say you pretended to be a squatter, how did all of that unfold? How did you do that?
So I just said, hey, this is how I stole a house in Portland, Oregon, and totally got away with it. So I basically say, all right, first I looked up a vacant house. Then I broke into the lockbox and gained access, no problem. Then when the police showed up, I had moved in my furniture and my buddies, and I said, oh, hey, sorry, but this is my house. And, once you're in possession of the house, possession's 9/10 of the law. The police officers got a he said, she said situation, got an owner saying, hey, I've never seen this guy before. And I've got the squatter, I guess me in this case, saying like, well, hey, no, I have a lease. Here's my lease. And of course, it's just something you printed up on your computer. And so the cop says, okay, well, this is a civil matter. I can't arrest this person. I can't pull them out of their house just because you say he's not supposed to be there. And plus, it's like, look, he's got his friends and his furniture in there. Like, this looks legit. So that leads to a dispute. And it's kind of a legal loophole that these squatters are exploiting. And when it comes to evicting them and getting them out, it takes months and months and months. And by then, they've trashed the place. They've taken advantage of the homeowner for tens of thousands of dollars. A lot of times they will pay them cash for keys to leave, and then they won't. So it's a real big problem.
Well, you're very, very lucky not to have had any direct issues with your own property portfolio with squatters. I mean, it's such a brazen act of breaking into somebody's property and then start moving in your own furniture. Well, let's change topics and find out a little bit about your property portfolio for our Aussie real estate investors. You've got a total of 25 properties. How much of a challenge has that been given the interest rates in the US combined with the economy over the last 12 to 18 months?
Let's call it 24 months, Craig. I've actually been less of an acquisitions terror over the last 2 years than maybe the rest of my career combined, because I do a lot of buying and selling and try and accumulate as much as I can get. But I tell you what, man, it's been a real slog over the last 24 months. And there's a few enemies out there, but I think principal among them is the most obvious one, and that would be interest rates.
What's really been happening in this space with investors that have portfolios is that they've decided to sell off part of their portfolio just purely from the serviceability and being able to cost out the price on keeping that portfolio alive. Now, obvious question to you, have you had to do that with your portfolio?
Yeah, and I don't love admitting it, but yes, I have. Over the last couple of years, there's been a bit of a cash crunch. I mean, any real estate investor that you talk to is probably going to be a little bit house poor. That's just the nature of the beast. But in order to keep cash flow going or keep cash in your pocket to take advantage of opportunities, then you need to have some liquidity. And real estate, unfortunately, doesn't offer a bunch of that. So what do? You have to liquidate some assets at some point. And so I did have some low hanging fruit. I had some flips that I decided to keep just because I figure like, okay, I can break even on this. And so I can add this one to the portfolio. It's a tiny little house. Let's just keep it. But after a couple of years, it's behind on cash flow. I've got a bunch of equity. My return on equity year over year is not that great because there's no cash flow and things aren't really appreciating. I might as well just cash in my chips. And plus I've got long-term capital gains on the sale. So I did that with, 3 properties over the last year or in 2024. And I'm not sorry that I did it. I paid a little bit of capital gains on it, but I've been able to redeploy the capital and do a 1031 exchange on one of them. But the rest, I just put into my pocket. I didn't have to pay a bunch of tax on it, and it allowed me to take advantage of some opportunities in some other spaces.
The interesting thing in this, where somebody like yourself, an investor, is diluting the property portfolio, is that the rents, they've been rising, right? And some people might say, well, that's interesting that they're having to sell off part of their portfolio when the rents have risen. So what do you say to that, where you've still got to sell the low-hanging fruit, as you mentioned?
Yeah, so it depends on where you are, because in a lot of cases, the rent has not gone up. It's remained pretty much stagnant. In other places, it has gone up a little bit. And here in other places, it's even gone down. It's become so different market to market in the US and worldwide for that matter. And because of that, we're all sort of playing in different ball games to some extent. There's some market cycles that are still on their way down. Then there's other ones that are rising right now. And the way that I reconcile this is on an even smaller scale, just property to property. How is this property performing? And a lot of it is a function of my personal time. How much time is this property taking me? And I want my properties to be as passive as possible. But that if you invest in property, there's no real such thing as completely passive income. But there's a couple of properties that had, just a little bit more maintenance than the other ones. And as soon as it crosses my desk, it receives a demerit. If I'm hearing about it, it's probably not good news. And I hopefully don't want to hear about it, right? So the ones that I got rid of also happen to have the distinction of having crossed my desk one too many times. And as soon as it starts taking up my time, sorry, you're out of here.
Okay, so Portland, Oregon, we mentioned at the top, that is where you are based. As we look at your portfolio, is it exclusively in Oregon or are you in other states?
Around here, this is in Portland. It's a great rental market, but this is a very blue city in a very blue state, and a lot of the landlord-tenant laws around here are very oppressive, to put it lightly. So I do have a lot of properties in Portland, but I also have a handful of properties in Idaho, and I used to own some properties down in Texas. And the main reasons that I invest in properties out of state is that I've got growth markets that are more landlord friendly, and they're the type of properties that can be easily owned from out of state. I don't need to be nearby them. In fact, there's a handful of them that I've never even seen before in person. So I really encourage people to look outside of their local pond, especially if you live somewhere that doesn't have a whole lot of appreciation or the rents aren't rising. There's not a lot of population growth or job growth. These are the things that drive rent and increase property values. And if you don't have that in your area, then I'd encourage you to seek greener pastures.
Now, in terms of just, how difficult and challenging the last 24 months has been, I like to ask this for investors. What do you think the sweet number is in having a property portfolio where you can kind of spread the ups and the downs so that you've got some protection? Some people will say it can be as low as 2, so I'm curious to ask you that.
Yeah, I'd say I like the saying to keep your eggs in one basket if you need to, but watch that basket extremely closely. And I think that's really true with real estate. You can get wealthy just buying all the properties in one town, one city, one street block, if you really feel like it. I've never actually been, bit by that because Portland's real estate market has pretty much always remained strong except for the Great Recession, just like everywhere else for that matter. But I have branched out into some commercial and industrial projects, and I'm really happy that I did. Different asset classes, different asset types. They offer, it's just a different beast, having to deal with business owners rather than residential tenants. A completely different deal with leasing, with the type of tenant that you're dealing with. You can make more money that way. And a lot of times when you go up in orders of magnitude in sale price and rent price, it actually gets easier. Buying a place for $1 million is really not a lot harder, if it harder at all, than buying a place that's $100,000 or $10 million for that matter. There's just more zeros, more investors, but in a way it's kind of easier. So yes, diversify. It's not a bad thing.
2025, of course, is fast approaching. How do you think your property portfolio of 25 properties will perform next year? Have you got a little bit of an understanding of what you think might happen?
I'm the passenger seat in the car that is the marketplace. And so whatever happens next year, it matters to me, but it doesn't keep me awake at night. I think it's going to be just fine, but if it completely craters, it's going to come back. I've been around for, 20 some years in the real estate game, and I've seen the highs and the lows, and I've seen a lot of people panic, and that's something that you're never going to see me do. I really wanted to sell everything I had back in 2009 because I didn't have as many properties back then, but I was really, really thinking about panic selling. But boy, oh boy, am I glad that I didn't, because those places are now worth 3 times as much. And so I think 2025 is going to be just fine. But if it's not, then, you're still not going to get me canceling any vacations.
Yeah, hold and retain. That's always a solid plan. All right, George. Well, we'll leave it on that note. Thanks so much for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast. Good luck with your property portfolio and those squatters in the US.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Craig. I appreciate your time.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.